Hi, boys and girls. Thank you for joining me again for another read aloud. Again, I decided to sit out here on my back deck and read you another book by Eric Carle. So yesterday we read this story, and I asked you to think about why do you think the authors wrote this book? And you probably were thinking that they wanted to teach us about animals that are endangered so that we could be aware of that and maybe try to make a difference. Maybe try to help these animals so that they don't have to be endangered anymore. It also is a fun book to read, so maybe they wanted to entertain us and make us happy because animals are fun to read about. So today I have another story. Again, you know Eric Carle loves to write about animals. So today's story is about a seahorse. This book is called Mr. Seahorse. Now, we already learned some information about seahorses last week when we read Horses of the Sea. And we learned that they too are endangered animals. But there's something else that's really special about seahorses, and Eric Carle wanted to teach us about that. He also put some beautiful illustrations and special effects in this book, so you'll get to see those too. So let's sit and listen to Mr. Seahorse. Let's see what we can learn about seahorses from this book. Mr. and Mrs. Seahorse drifted gently through the sea. Mrs. Seahorse began to wiggle and twist this way and that. "It's time for me to lay my eggs," she said. "Can I help?" asked Mr. Seahorse. "Oh, yes, thank you," said Mrs. Seahorse, and she laid her eggs into a pouch on Mr. Seahorse's belly. "I'll take good care of our eggs," said Mr. Seahorse. "I promise." So she's giving the eggs to Mr. Seahorse to take care of. As Mr. Seahorse drifted gently through the sea, he passed right by... Can you tell what's in the seaweed? A group of trumpet fish hidden in a patch of reeds. But before long, Mr. Seahorse met another fish. "How are you, Mr. Stickleback?" asked Mr. Seahorse. "Delighted," replied Mr. Stickleback. "I just built a nest, and right away Mrs. Stickleback laid her eggs into it. Now I am taking good care of them until they hatch." "Keep up the good work," said Mr. Seahorse, and swam on his way. So while this father is taking care of his eggs, the Stickleback father is taking care of his eggs. As Mr. Seahorse drifted gently through the sea, he passed right by... Can you tell who's hiding? It's camouflage. A lionfish hidden behind a coral reef. But before long, Mr. Seahorse met another fish. "How are you, Mr. Tilapia?" asked Mr. Seahorse. Mr. Tilapia couldn't answer. His mouth was full of eggs. "Now you are taking good care of them until they hatch." Mr. Tilapia nodded his head. "You must be very happy," said Mr. Seahorse, and swam on his way. So this dad is taking care of eggs too. As Mr. Seahorse drifted gently through the sea, he passed right by... Who's hiding? There's some more camouflage. Several leaf fish hidden among the seaweed. But before long, Mr. Seahorse met another fish. "How are you, Mr. Curtis?" asked Mr. Seahorse. "Perfectly fine," replied Mr. Curtis. Mrs. Curtis laid her eggs, and I've stuck them on my head. Now I'm taking good care of them until they hatch. "You are doing a good job," said Mr. Seahorse, and swam on his way. Look at, he's upside down. He's still got the eggs in his belly, and Mr. Curtis is carrying the eggs on his head. As Mr. Seahorse drifted gently through the sea, he passed right by... Who's behind this big stone? A stonefish hidden behind a rock. That's good camouflage. But before long, Mr. Seahorse met another fish. "How are you, Mr. Pipe?" asked Mr. Seahorse. "Couldn't be better," replied Mr. Pipe. "Mrs. Pipe laid her eggs along my belly. Now I am taking good care of them until they hatch." "You should feel proud of yourself," said Mr. Seahorse, and swam on his way. But before long, Mr. Seahorse met another fish. "How are you, Mr. Bullhead?" asked Mr. Seahorse. "Tip-top," replied Mr. Bullhead. "Mrs. Bullhead laid her eggs, and the eggs hatched. Now I'm babysitting." "You are doing a fine job," said Mr. Seahorse, and swam on his way. Look at all those baby bullheads. The time had come for the Seahorse babies to be born. Mr. Seahorse wiggled and twisted this way and that. At last, the babies tumbled from Mr. Seahorse's pouch and swam away. One baby turned around and tried to come back into the pouch. "Oh, no," said Mr. Seahorse. "I do love you, but now you are ready to be on your own." And that's the end of the story. So, I think Mr. Eric Carle wrote this book because, one, he wanted to tell us an entertaining story, but two, he wanted us to learn some facts about seahorses and other ocean animals. There are lots of animals that hide in the ocean and use camouflage, so we saw some of those. But we also learned about some animals in the saltwater habitat where the fathers take care of the eggs and the babies. Oftentimes it's the mothers that will care for the eggs and babies. But this book tells us about some interesting creatures where the daddies do a lot of helping. They have to be responsible. And they have to try to protect their little eggs. So I want you to think about a time when maybe you were responsible. Responsible means that you do something that you know is right and you work hard at it. So for example, this morning I had a lot of work to do and there was a bunch of laundry to fold, and my son Chase was responsible. He went and folded the laundry for me so that I wouldn't have to do it. That was responsible of him. Or maybe you can think of a time where you did something that you know had to be done and you did it. Or maybe there was a time where you lost something or broke something and you tried to find it or fix it. I bet there's lots of times when you were responsible. So today I would love it if maybe you could talk about it or you could write about it in your writing journal. These writing journals come in very handy. You could write the title of the book, Mr. Seahorse, and then you can write this sentence. I was responsible when... Here comes the wind. Maybe I should be responsible and go inside. Have fun. Hope you enjoyed the story. See you next time.